When we're talking about the future of cities, we have to also be working with what's already here. It's not that we looked at the existing talent pool and went, they're not talented. We looked at the existing talent pool and went, if we're designing the cities of the future, shouldn't our practice reflect the city in which we live?
Hey Ollie, what problems are you trying to solve in UK cities right now?
First off, thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here in this sort of virtual interview environment. What problems are we trying to solve in cities? So I think I'm going to take it back to our kind of top line of our business, which is that we're building a company that defines the future of our cities. And so that it breaks down into two pieces. We're building a company, and that has its own, challenges and things that we need to think about. And then we're interested in that company embracing the future of cities. And our sort of manifesto about what we think about the urban environment is that basically, particularly in a city like London, which we largely operate in, there's a grain that's already here. And so we think when we're talking about the future of cities, we have to also be working with what's already here. Architecture, when it's at its best, when it's at its most creative, bounces off the things around it. And that's what, that's what our most joyful projects are about, taking what's there, reimagining it so that it can be better, and putting, the human experience at the heart of how we design.
Yeah, how do you blend that with kind of your environmental impact as well? So whilst you're trying to reimagine these buildings and reimagine how they'll work with those people, we've got all these old structures. How do you kind of balance that with the environmental aspects that we have to consider as well?
Well, I suppose at a high level, the most sustainable building is the one that's already built. So we do try and keep the buildings that we're working with in situ. It's not always the case. And some projects that we are working on are new builds. And so we've just submitted a scheme for 270 new homes embarking in Dagenham, where, it's an existing single-story warehouse on site, and we're replacing it with an 18-story, between sort of 6 and 18-story residential building. And in that context, like that, there's not much you can do with a single-story warehouse. That approach of sort of replacement works in some locations, but in other locations, you really, we want to always be trying to use the buildings that are already there. They are going to be the most sustainable. So we've got a scheme in the City of London where it's an existing office building. We're converting it to a hotel, and we want to keep as much of the fabric as possible, but the floor levels actually, to make it work for a new hotel use, need to be adjusted. And so we're kind of working with an amazing structural engineer to actually sort of cut the pieces of steel and raise the floors up, and then refix them in a new position. Because, as much as the most sustainable thing that you can do is to try and use what's already there, and then upgrade it so that it's, performs at a modern standard.
I guess the most perfect scenario is you could take a building back apart again and kind of restack it in a mode you would wish to, but with a medium high-rise building, that's not practical. It's the first feedback I've had where they're cutting floors and restacking them and moving them internally to refit, because it's often a problem with existing buildings that their floor heights are restricted for their future use, or future M&E requirements as well, which I guess influence a lot of floor heights and ceiling heights.
Yeah, it's a tough challenge, but I think in that particular location, so it's in the City of London, there's a very clear and quite well-defined retrofit policy, which I think is one of the best ones in London. It doesn't say retrofit only, it says retrofit first. And if you can demonstrate that you're reusing a certain amount of the building, then it's a sort of simpler planning process. So it's really good policy because it incentivizes you to really think creatively about how you can reuse building materials in situ. And so that's where that idea has come from. It's because there's an incentivization in the planning system to reuse buildings. The planning system is often seen negatively, but I think, as somewhat of a hindrance. But I disagree with that. I think that whilst the implementation of the planning system can be a bit slow, and sometimes there can be, in certain situations, kind of contradictory policies, but most often I think planners do a great job. There's just need to be more of them, and I think lots of policies are, for instance, this one coming from a really great place of trying to encourage creative thinking. And it's maybe a contradictory view that I think our planning system is actually really good and one of the best systems in the world, because it requires so much of you, so much of the architect, so much of the developer. It pushes for quality. It pushes for, it's aspirational, because it is demanding you to respond to all these different policies and all these different layers of legislation. It just needs more people to be manning it, administering it, because of the amount of requirements that are insisted upon. And then there also needs to be the opportunity for case officers to sort of be slightly subjective, because some of these policy things, if you administer them by the letter of the book, then it can be very difficult to hit every single point, because some of them might contradict. But if you have a good case officer who's able to sort of take a view on whether your proposal is kind of meeting the spirit and making a place better, and therefore in the kind of the balance of benefits are that it's going to be providing something that is not currently provided for local residents, and you're able to be slightly subjective about the rules, then I think that our planning system is really great, because it is demanding.
Yeah, so it demands a lot from you to be kind of lateral thinking, but you think your view at the moment is that it's under-resourced to be able to then process the level of information that you're having to provide. You seeing that as one of the biggest kind of headwinds to developments at the moment in that retrofit space?
I don't think I'm the only person that thinks that. I think even planners would say that they're under-resourced, and they work very hard and mostly do a pretty great job. And there just needs to be more of them. If we want, this Rolls Royce of the planning system that we've got. If you look at somewhere like the US, and actually, I don't know specifically, because it probably changes state to state, but they have much more of a sort of permissive system. So it's like, if you do this, then you can have this. So if you look at those pencil towers that in New York, they're very tall, very slender towers next to Central Park. Those are the result of a permissive, essentially a permitted development rule that dates back to the kind of 60s or 70s, which says you can basically get the air rights from all these buildings around it, and you can stack them on top of each other, and you can end up with this mad pencil tower, which at the time it wasn't structurally feasible to do, but now it is. And because it's sort of a more rule-based, like design codes, design rules, you can end up with these sort of mad things like that. In the UK, we'd have a bit of permitted development, but largely we have a system that is individualized for that site. So on every case by case, you are getting a series of very clever people, planners, to assess whether your proposal meets a set of quite wide-ranging parameters, which cover fire, daylight, design, wind. All these different things need to be assessed on a case-by-case, individualized basis for that site. It's so rigorous. It's when you say it like that versus like at a more kind of design code basis, where you go, well, if you're in this location and it's residential and it's 5 stories tall, you've got the green light as long as it kind of looks like this. That will be the alternative. So we have this system which every case must be looked at individually, and if we want that, then we need to staff it appropriately, because there's going to be lots and lots of people required to assess whether you're meeting all of these different criteria.
Yeah. And for what you're saying, it's a more positive way of doing it. It just needs a greater resource to be able to process on that basis.
I think so. I was reading a case yesterday where I think it's the Debenhams I believe it's Staines. I think it's a locally listed building in the centre of town. Obviously, Debenhams went bust, so the building's been vacant for 4 years now. But somebody put in an application to knock it down and build some residential. And there was a local outcry, because and also there was a heritage outcry because it was a locally listed building. So it got refused because of the loss of the heritage asset. So, okay, fine. So I think either the same developer or a different developer put forward a proposal for permitted development because it's vacant, Class E, to convert it into residential. And again, it was turned down. So you're like, okay, so we've got an empty building in the centre of a town. You can't knock it down to redevelop it into residential, and you can't convert it into residential. And Debenhams went bust, and there's very little demand for a town centre retail. So what are you going to do? Just sit there with an empty building that's a heritage asset? That's where possibly the individualised way that we're able to look at case by case and have committees and various, different parties, you can end up in a situation where the computer is always going to say no. And that is the sort of, that's the flip side of having such a robust planning system, is that, sometimes it can be that it's very difficult to, I don't really know how that scheme would ever, how do you get through this? You can't knock it down and you also can't convert it, and there's no demand for the thing that it is. Feels silly in the middle of a town centre to have a vacant building.
You need that logical override to go, this is ridiculous. Okay, what are we going to do with this building?
Exactly.
Let's talk about tech. Have you got a view for tech for the future of your practice?
My view is there's so much. My view is that there's, like, if you want to know my real view on technology and its application to architecture, we don't even know yet. Every industry is being disrupted, and architecture will be on, in that pathway, because every industry will be. Architecture is a really complicated one to disrupt meaningfully, but it will happen. It's not going to be us that does it. Like, somebody's going to come up with some AI that can basically detail a whole building for you. So you could maybe put in your planning stage model, and you just go Control Apple, detail that building, and it will be able to do it. It probably already exists somewhere, and then it will be bought by one of the big boys. It will be bought by Revit or ArchiCAD, and they'll integrate it into their software. That's the future of technology, and it will make lots and lots of architecture technologists and stuff redundant, because but this is not what I'm doing. This is just my view on. You asked my view on technology, so I think it's a really difficult question for me to answer. We at the moment are always trying to be at the cutting edge, but the cutting edge now will be dictated not by architects. It will be dictated by people creating new pieces of AI enabled software that will then be adopted by the big software companies, and architects will pay a subscription to use it. That's my prediction. It's a really difficult one for like, we used to use VR, and that used to be the cutting edge. That COVID kind of put an end to a lot of face-to-face meetings. We do a lot more on Teams, and you just kind of then share the 3D model. So that application of VR is, we still use it with like sort of end user clients. So we do film and photography studios, and we do some B2C stuff, and we will use it with people who are less well versed with looking at floor plans. But a lot of B2B clients, property developers, they don't necessarily want that VR experience. They're well versed enough at looking at floor plans to be able to know what you're going to get. It's when you're dealing with schools, film and photographic studios. We've done a climbing center, end user clients who are doing houses. Those type of users really benefit from the VR experience, because they're less used to looking at plans, and it basically decreases the amount of uncertainty you have over what they're going to end up with. But if you ask me for my general view about what's technology going to do for architecture in the next 10 years, it's going to absolutely decimate it in the same way it's going to decimate every other industry, and there's going to be lots of people that are not employed, but that's nothing to do with me. It's just going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, in my view, like many is, and in lots of different industries, is it just makes things so much more efficient. And it's at what level does it affect? And I guess you're still going to have that overarching human at the top that's got to disseminate that information and have that greater vision to be able to input it into what is effectively a huge processor. And I think you're right, it should be able to crank out those very quick regulatory drawings and a million different concepts in 20 seconds, but it's still got to take that information from somewhere.
I agree. That's it. I'm less of an optimist about technology than I used to be, because I don't think that this next round of AI enabled, but basically drafting software, is necessarily going to be good for the industry as a whole. How are people going to come through the ranks without doing that stuff where you were doing window schedules, then you were doing external details, and you were learning as you go? And what happens when that process is automated? How do people come into the industry?
Yeah, let's loop straight into it. So you have the AAL Academy, and you use it to build your own talent pool. Why did you set it up? What did you not find out there, and how does it support your business?
Yeah, for us, I don't think it was a matter of not finding it out there. There's a lot of talented architects coming through the standard route, and the standard route is, at the moment, it's a 3-year course, then a 1 year out, then a 2 years back full time at university, and then it's a 1 year whatever, your final year doing your part 3. So it's a very long process. It's quite expensive. Costs about 100 grand now to go through all those processes. And it tends to be, and this is just, again, not by my design, but it just is, that it's a sort of middle class pursuit, because it's like the people that go into architecture tend to be, you've got to understand that you're going to need to commit 100 grand. It wasn't that much when I trained, but now it is. And it's not a massively well-paid career at the end of it. So it tends to be that you're getting sort of the same old people coming through the existing system. So it's not that we looked at the existing talent pool and went, they're not talented. We looked at the existing talent pool and went, if we're designing the cities of the future, shouldn't our practice reflect the city in which we live? And if, so we're based in Tower Hamlets, and it just, what we thought was, well, how do we create a talent pool that is from Tower Hamlets, Hackney, Barking and Dagenham? And so we spent a long time trying to set up this academy. And eventually we found New City College, who we partner with to deliver essentially it's a T-level qualification. So we go into the schools at the sort of age 14, 15, we kind of do co-design workshops with the kids. We're like, this is, a lot of people, who grow up in a city don't understand that the city is not immovable. It's like growing up around mountains and thinking that they've always been there. But cities aren't like mountains. They got made and they can be changed. And that's the thing that we go in and try and tell these kids is like, somebody made this and somebody can change this. And that's that person's called an architect, and you can be an architect. You can change the city. We go in and we do these kind of co-design workshops where we pitch that. And then out of that, per year, 4 or 5 people want to go and study on the built environment T-level course. And we can then provide part of the teaching element for that T-level course. So we tend to get 4 or 5 pupils per year, age 16 to 18. And they come in and they have to do 20 days per year for 2 years. And so we then overlap. We have them in pairs, and they come in. And so per year, we're doing kind of 6 to 8 pupils, taking them through the system from 16 to 18. And they leave having done 40 days with us. And we then know who the really good ones are, who the really passionate ones are. And for those ones that are really passionate and want to keep going, we then partner with London South Bank University, and we can offer them a 4-year degree. But it's done as an apprenticeship degree. So they don't pay for it. We pay not very much, but it's amazing. It's subsidized. So instead of paying 100 grand for, or whatever it would be, 30 grand for the first 3 years of their course, we pay for their course, and we pay them to come and work for us as an apprentice 4 days a week. The fifth day they attend the university, and so we take them on at 16. By the time they're 24, 25, they can have gone through the system without having to pay out any fees for education.
Wow.
It's just slightly changed because we've lost access to the level 7 funding, which would be the last bit, but we would have previously been able to get them all the way through to part 3 without ever having to pay. The government have just changed the last bit. So, but it's still like for the younger people, we're taking them, upskilling them to get the T levels. Even if they don't go with us, they can go to university in the normal way with the T levels. But we're, the ones that we're keeping and taking on through the LSBU, it's amazing watching them, from when they first come in at 16 saying, yeah, I really want to be an architect 'cause I used to play Lego. And then now, we just actually won a bid to design essentially a kind of academy. And we used one of our people that was from the AAL Academy to kind of do the design for another of these facilities. And that was amazing, like kind of, all the bits of the plan linking up. So it's one of the things that I'm proudest of, to be honest. It's not, that's why I say our top level is to build a company that designs the city of the future, because as much as I'm proud of some of the buildings that we've designed, I'm also really proud of the people that we've built, and that we've grown.
Yeah, I love that, supporting the local community, and I did not know that there were the support mechanisms out there to allow what is now so challenging for loads of people to go through that prolonged education stint to come out into what is a highly competitive environment, which I think you rightly say is underpaid for the skill that's provided and the talent pool that's out there. But great to know that there are modes to support that and that you're embracing it. And I think it's amazing that you've been able to have people cycle back to be able to design the kind of the environment that they've been kind of supported by.